Have you been thinking a little bit more about, I wish I could change my life and I wish I could be doing something else? Or do you have this like deep aching pain to be more joyful or to see more things or to have more free time or whatever that nagging gut, deep rooted feeling is? It's right. And I think you should follow it. I think what I want to talk a little bit about is how I changed my life it's only been 6, 7, 8 months now. And it was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make, but I have been completely changed and altered. I feel more like myself. I don't think I felt the way that I feel since I was like in my early 20s. I understand that those feelings and those thoughts can be so overwhelming because if you are in a place where you feel stuck or you feel like I can't do X, Y, or Z because I don't have the financial stability or I don't know what's going to happen if it doesn't work out, those are just things that you have to be okay with. You have to learn how to be okay with the unknown. You have to learn how to be okay with leaning into the fear, leaning into the unknown, because without actually taking that first step, you're never going to know if maybe that fear or that thought or that nagging kind of thing was maybe just like your brain trying to keep you safe. And it really wasn't true. Things kind of helped me guide myself into making that decision because I think ultimately we're waiting for someone to tell us that it's okay. We're waiting for someone to tell us that the time is right, or we're waiting for that perfect moment, and there's never a perfect moment. So I'm going to share a little bit about how I got to the place that I am, what certain things that I, journaled about, thought about, that helped me kind of understand what it is that was like my deep-rooted fear, so that way I could keep trying to solve that for myself and make that decision a lot easier. So we are going to talk a little bit more about that in this video. So if you are interested in that, please stay along. If you're, mildly interested and you also want to see some, footage from Edinburgh in Scotland, also stay along here. Alright, so the number one thing that I did when I first started thinking about do I want to be doing this, was I tried to think about, I did this wheel, and I'm going to put it up on the screen now and I'm going to talk it through. And then I would recommend doing it every 6 months, maybe every month, if you're getting started. Alright, so why is this wheel important? You want to be able to check in with yourself and try and understand, are you actually happy, or is there some other motivating factor there? So I'm going to put in what was really a big takeaway for me. So I am back. I'm back in the hotel and I just want to chat a little. But yeah, I think I just want to chat a little bit. So I didn't script any of this and I thought about scripting it, but I think I'm just going to go off the whim. So I will hopefully in post-edit be able to make this a little bit more cohesive. But I think where I was talking when I was out in the city was that one of the number one things that I did when I was trying to decide what I should do. So one of the number one things that I did when I was deciding, when I was really struggling with the idea of how to basically uproot and upend my entire life. I was just so unhappy And one of the number one things that I did was wheel. So you take a circle, just draw a circle on the page, and then break it up into however many pieces. So 8, 7, whatever it is. I'm going to put what I put up here on screen, but I'm pretty sure it was like family, friends, romance, or relationship, money, joy, I think I put creativity and something else, but so basically you cut up the circle into all these little pie pieces, and then within each, so just make circles within that. So that way you're getting like 1 through 10 on a scale for each specific piece. And then from each piece, really reflect on where you currently sit in your, like if you were to sit down today and rate that between like 0, 1 being like totally, there's nothing there. Like I don't see, if we're talking about friends, I don't see my friends anymore. Maybe you moved to a new city, you don't have any friends, you feel really disconnected, and maybe it's just hard to talk to friends and you genuinely don't have that contact. Maybe it is a 1 for that period of time, and that's okay. But really be honest with yourself with each section of like what rating that looks like. And be very like, if you're like, okay, middle ground is like, my base is always going to be 3 because to me that's like rock bottom. Like whatever that is for you, figure that out. For me, I did this every 6 months. So I've been doing this for a while now. I think I learned it, I don't know how I found out about this, but I saw it on a different Ali Abdul video like a year later. So I'm not sure exactly who this comes from, and what's funny is I was doing it, and then my manager, who I felt very connected to, in one of our like pod meetings, she was just like, hey, I have this thing I want us to do. It was exactly that, and I don't know. Anyways, so I did this every 6 months, and so like I look back every 6 months and go, okay, you know, let me reflect on this past 6 months, like where am I at? And that way I can go back and look and see like, okay, what shifts did I have this last 6 months in my life that maybe contributed to X, Y, or Z, right? And how I knew it was time was back in the like December of 2024, my father had passed. I left a relationship. I had decided to move. A lot of things were changing, but I felt like I was moving in the right direction. But I did this right before that, like 2025 started, and I did my whole wheel, and joy was on the bottom again. Like it makes sense because you know, it's kind of hard to be super joyful when you're going through grief of many scales. But this one was in particular a really big eye-opener. So I saw that joy again was on the bottom, and that makes complete sense because I, you know, was going through a lot of grief, and why would it be high? But what I think I reflected on with a lot of that change was this idea of, you know, joy was equally as low in like the hardest of moments as it was during what I thought was like a great time. And so I think that was it for me, where I was like, I am actually just not happy. I don't have joy in my life. I don't have this like sense of wonder anymore. I don't have this like excitement for the, you know, my time that is like in front of me. And that was hard because I was like, I don't want to be, I didn't want to be where I was at 5 years from now. I couldn't go back to that same state anymore. And I think that was part of it, was I knew like the only thing that I hadn't changed was my job. Like my location had changed, my proximity to family had changed, which had been something that was a really big like stressor. You know, I think part of it was I looked at and I took catalog of it when I couldn't, when I finally had this state of like everything else is burned down and there's only one thing that's left, and I had to do something about it, because if I didn't, then I wouldn't know if there was something else that I needed to search for to get that joy back, or to get that like sense of like myself back. And I think that's what's so interesting, is that if you do these reflections, you know, maybe it's every month, maybe it's every 3-6 months like me. Some people do it every year. I think it needs to happen more often, because we can be a completely different person a year from now as we were the year before. And so I think that's kind of what it is like you need to be taking action on understanding internally where you are on every level. And so like it's as simple as that, of like rating what it is that you feel in joy and friendship and whatever. And then that way, like you can then look at it and go, okay, in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, I'm going to focus on this, right? And so I would 100% say, whether it be this like wheel, I don't know what it's called, but whatever, whether it's this that you're doing or some other like formatted way, to be able to easily look back and say, okay, over this X amount of time, I changed this, and this is what's happened, and this is how I'm feeling, and then this is like a broader sense of like my life. Without that, it's really hard to see the pattern. That's really hard to kind of see like, okay, I changed this or I didn't change this, you know, and maybe those things, you know, again, like in my part, like I didn't know that the things that I had changed weren't the source of that joy factor. After you kind of figure out what it is, I think the number one thing too is if it is that you need to leave your job, but you don't know where to go, whatever. After that is figuring out what it is that is your like crutch. So again, this is more kind of internal work. This is something that I've learned a lot about myself over the years, and so it might take a little bit more time if you're unsure. I would recommend just doing reading on certain things. I would recommend leaning into the areas that you avoid. So for me, for a long time, it was money. I didn't grow up with like the very solid financial stability. I had school debt, and then I, wasn't making enough, and I knew that I needed to do something about it because I didn't want to be in this state, but I didn't understand money. And so I spent years just learning and trying and like slowly, like step by step, changing something to make myself feel better. If money is also something that you struggle with, I would highly recommend Ramit Sethi's I'll Teach You to Be Rich. He also has, so it's a book, and then he also has a Money for Couples. If you are in a partnership, I would highly recommend that. He also has a YouTube channel, which is fantastic. If you just want to listen in on internal, on the stories that people say and the storylines that everyone has for their specific money mindset. So the way that we grew up with money, the way that we find safety in it is a huge factor in our decisions that we make. And then particularly too, the fact that we live, if you live in the United States, everything we do is you need to make more money, you're not doing enough, you need to hustle more, you need to whatever. And like, there isn't these pieces of like the humanity community. Like, maybe you do need to, maybe the slow life is actually better. Maybe you don't need the extra 30,000. Maybe you just need to, start enjoying your life. There's different mindsets around it. And so I think if you're consumed, like, I was with it, it's really hard to get out of the fact that it's like, okay, I need to pay back my student loans, and I also want to feel more secure. In my mind, it was, I need to make more money. And so I was on this path of, I was straddling the path of like, I want to like what I'm doing and I want there to be passion, but I also want there to be money. And so I definitely straddled that through my entire career path. And so for me, when I look back on my career path, I can definitely see there's a through line between what it is that I was doing. Like, I love learning. And so like, I would get bored with certain aspects and be like, okay, I want to learn this area. Maybe there's things in here that I could, grow from and learn from. And then, but ultimately it was just solely, I want more money. And because in my brain, I thought more money equals more security. And in part it does, but if you aren't understanding or learning how you save money, how you spend money, it potentially doesn't help at all. And, you're still in that same mindset, even though you might have tripled your income. So I think there's a lot in terms of that. So for me, that is something that I know is my, like, when I'm saying understand what your true core wound is, in the sense of like, what are the decisions, like what decisions, when you have to make decisions, like, is there something that you're kind of defaulting to that you're saying, oh, this is why I'm going to make the decision, and is it feels right? Is it because it truly does feel right? Or is it because you're making that decision based off of this like uneasy part of you that you haven't solved or haven't like delved into a little bit? And so for me, for a while, I was learning about money, but I hadn't had enough to understand that even though I was saving more and I had this like security fund there, that I just had this internal need of like, I need more and I need more. And so I can't let it go because I need more, because there was a scarcity mindset there with it. So, if you're wanting to change things around and you also struggle with money, or you don't just have someone that can support you, I would 100% say go straight into the financial side of it. Like, before you make any, like, do the internal stuff of like, how am I feeling? Like, is there certain aspects that I can change, like, and see it over time? And maybe you can give yourself a little bit, like, maybe it's a deadline of like 6 months before you make a decision, or like a year before you make, another decision. But definitely do that first. After that, if you can't support yourself to make a big change, or to give yourself a break, or to like go into something that might be uncertain because you don't have the funds sitting there that you can count on for yourself, then I would say go straight into the money side of it, psychology for you, and learn about the things that you have been straying away from. Learn about how if you struggle with budgeting, start budgeting. Like, I know it's as basic as it is, but like, I don't want to say that money is the number one factor, but for me, it was the number one factor for me to be able to change, to be able to make the decision that I made, is knowing that I had the funds there for me to use. And I, for now on, 100% will never allow myself to not have that. I want to make decisions based off of internally what I want, not based out of scarcity. So as a quick little tidbit as well, I did that little pie chart, and then I did it again after I had quit 6 months, or I quit in August, and then in December I did the same chart again, and everything everything that I had been struggling with to move on that scale just exploded. Friendships, family, like every aspect. Joy was like, my joy is just, I feel more like myself. And I was hoping that this is how I would feel, and it wasn't going to just have this joy just sticking there. But like, I genuinely have never felt more like myself and more happy and at peace than I am now. But on the other side, my money is down like drastically. And I thought I was going to feel worse about it, but I don't. I think it's because I've also realized, and I've healed a little bit. I know I have so much more to heal from, but like, there's certain aspects with realizing that the money will come as long as you put in the effort and you are working. Like I'm working every day. There isn't a day that I'm not doing something, but I've never been happier because of the decisions that I've made. So number one, do your little pie chart or some way to like understand where you're currently at, so you can kind of look back and see some level of like change. The data points are everything to understand because on the day-to-day we're different, but like when we boil it down, there's probably some story that we can kind of pull through based off of that data. Number two, look into figuring out like what is the core thing that's really driving a lot of my decisions today. And if it is money, then start making sure that you have the funds there to, make a change, because having that there is the most freeing thing in the entire world. I've never felt this level of freedom because of that. And I'm so grateful that I sacrificed for the time to be able to know that I had that sitting there for me. We want to change our life in a year, right? So I would say if you know you have money sitting there and you know the certain aspect that needs to change, I'm going to go off of the example that, you need to change your job and you need to be doing something different, because that's just my experience. Maybe there's other things out there, of course. I was 35 when I made the decision. I made the decision in January that I was going to quit my job. I gave myself a deadline. I said by June 1st, if I was still unhappy and I hadn't figured out any other option, that I would quit. It wasn't this like had to happen. It was a check-in, but it was also like, I have X amount of time to save more money and to just stockpile. So it was like this deadline that gave me a focus, but it also gave me this check-in with myself again. And it was another like 6 months to, be generous with, maybe I'm just having a blip in time that's bad. And I didn't want to make a big drastic decision based off of that. I wanted to make it based off of the fact that like, this is what I need. So I gave myself a 6-month deadline. So I would say pick that date, whatever it is. If it's 6 months, if it's 3 months, whatever feels comfortable for you. Maybe it's 5 years and that's okay. Maybe there's like smaller goals in the middle of it. But I picked June 1st, and every month I did a little, like, I did a financial kind of breakdown for myself of being like, okay, where can I save more money? What can I do? What are my like, things that I would be struggling with? And I kept, dialing things in. And I imagined, this is the other thing, I spent time thinking through, okay, if I were to quit in June and I couldn't get a client, couldn't, work another job, couldn't find another job. That is not really realistic, but like in the worst of the worst case scenario, like how long could I afford for myself to give myself that break? And So I figured out that runway for myself. And until I had enough money to make myself feel comfortable, to alleviate that risk, I, just kept, taking money and putting it away. But every month I practiced mentally pretending like that money was leaving my account, because that was the thing I was afraid of. I wasn't scared that I was going to be terrified every month that the money was going away. And I kept trying to rewrite that in my brain, or rewrite that in like my thoughts, that it was a gift. It wasn't something to be afraid of. It was a gift. And I didn't know if it was going to work, but I was just trying to mentally prepare myself. So we're going to fast forward. It's now June, and I am 100%, like, I have to go, but I wasn't ready. And I struggled with this. I struggled with like, is there a right time? Should I just wait 6 more months? It was a lot of like internal kind of pushing. And I knew it was because I wanted to save more money, and I was nervous about the economy, and everyone was telling me like, just wait for the economy needs, like, will be better. Like, wait for that, wait for X, Y, or Z. And I had an impromptu conversation with a stranger. She was a stranger, but it was in this group that was very welcoming and open to this type of conversations. And she said, it is, I can't remember verbatim what she said, but it was to the likes of, if you're miserable, don't stay. Like, it's bad for the company, but it's also horrible for you. Like, you're miserable. It's time to go. And as like, I know that, but like, it's so hard because it's so hard because you worked so hard to get this position or this job or whatever. And I think that was the moment that I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I am miserable still. It's been 6 months since I made this decision. I am miserable. I'm going to just have to figure it out. So I gave myself the second deadline, which was July 15, and I had to put in my notice. And so it literally was up until that day. And I actually ended up having to quit twice because I couldn't do it the first time I had the meeting with my manager. So I quit, and I instantly felt relief. It was just instant. And I haven't looked back since. So I will say, like, give yourself grace. Keep giving yourself deadlines, but be honest with yourself of, what good feels like, and what calm feels like. And coming from not a very, calm childhood, I do live in a sense of like trauma state of like fight or flight. But I still know what calm feels like, even though if it's uncomfortable for me. And so I am so happy I made that decision. But one of the best things about it was the fact that it was the first month in August where I was pulling from my funds. No, it wasn't August, it was September, because I was still getting paid. So in September was the first month that I was starting to pull from my emergency fund. And I genuinely, internally, I watched it, I paid it, and I felt joy because I felt like I was giving myself a gift. So I think a lot of it is just our internal things that we need to think through, and the internal stories that we tell ourselves that are holding ourselves back, because no one's going to stop you from making a change, but no one's going to give you permission to make the change either. So it's literally on you, and to give yourself a chance. And so I think part of it is I'm going to be very have the money there. And if you don't have it, then give yourself more time. or give yourself, maybe it's you do have a part-time job instead of taking time off, or maybe it's, you extend that time to get where you want to go. So the job that I'm in, I'm not being paid a whole lot, but it's also a super flexible job. I'm in Edinburgh at the moment, and I am so happy. Like, this is something that I was never going to be able to do on a regular basis. So, this is something I feel really grateful for. And even though I'm not being paid a lot, I'm covering my basics. I'm covering my basic and expenses, majority of it. And then I'm also covering my healthcare and making sure I have benefits and, doing the things that I know I need as like a baseline to feel comfortable. And if this is a long-term thing, I would be happy about it. If it's something that I do for 5-10 years until the things that I want to do with my business, get to a good state, also okay with that. I just know that there are other options than just the traditional track. And so keep your mind open to additional things. Try and go back to the things that make you feel joyful in general. If you're in that same state of feeling kind of down, and not feeling like yourself, because the world we live in is difficult at the moment. And I do think that the more positive that we feel and the more joy that we can have on a day-to-day, the better for everyone in our lives, in our circle, and the moments that we have with each other. So that was how I made a change in a year. I think a lot of it is internal. A lot of it is reflection. A lot of it is journaling. A lot of it is talking to someone if possible. A lot of it's just research on your own of, I mentioned Ramit Sethi's financial stuff, 100%. I watch all of his YouTube conversations because they're so helpful for me and insightful for me to understand myself, even through someone else's visions of their financial outlook. And then, if I think of anything other books, and things like that, I will say the Mountain Is You book, that was super helpful. I mentioned Ali Abdal's YouTube channel. There's certain things on there. That was where some of the pie chart stuff, I know that was on there, and quite a few other things, but maybe I'll put all that stuff down below. But I'm going to put together a little Miro board as well of, a little bit of the process, some of the things that I did. So if you want to, feel free to utilize that. Let me know down below if this is helpful, if this was helpful to hear. And I will hopefully be back soon with more updates on how this year how I changed my life in a year. See you in the next one. Please comment, or subscribe. Leave me a comment. This helps me know if any of this is resonating with anybody. I know I'm a newer channel, so I'm just learning, sharing. So I will see you then in the next city. All right, so I got myself some gluten-free. I went to Marks and Spencer's and I got gluten-free crackers, the sweet chili hummus, and a bunch of Percy pigs, which I'm gonna give to people. But all right.